Colin, I'm going to tag team here. We're going to look at status distribution of sawfish in the Eastern Indian and Western Pacific Oceans. So it covers what is FAO areas 71 and 61 in the Pacific, Western Central Pacific and Northwest Pacific, and the Eastern Indian Ocean in the Indian. So our area of interest went across to India, so everything from Southeast Asia, Australia through to India. We're dealing with 4 species. Pristis clavata, the dwarf sawfish, which Colin will talk about, because despite a lot of reports from outside of Australia, it's never been confirmed. There's no records, there's really no support for that occurs outside of Australia. So we should think of it as an Australian endemic until we can verify that, but suspicions are that it is an Australian endemic. Apologies to Vincent and the team for using the old names, but we're talking about freshwater sawfish, what we call freshwater sawfish, Pristis marcodon, or what we can call the Indo-West Pacific population of Pristis pristis, greens and narrows. So those species that we'll be talking about here. So starting that with, I'm going to look at the region. Is there a winner?
Yeah.
Huh?
Sorry, that way, press the top one.
Cool. Okay, so I'm going to talk about everything excluding Australia. So I'm going to talk about the Eastern Indian, Western Pacific, with the exception of Australia. And we've done that, we split it out because there really is big differences between the status and situation in Australia versus the rest of this region here. So with Pristis pristis, ignore these question marks on this map, so we're focusing on this area. Used to be or formerly widespread throughout Southeast Asia, across to India. Known from several major river systems in the region, in New Guinea, places like the Fly River, in Borneo as well, places throughout Southeast Asia and Indonesia, Sumatra, places like that. All populations are probably severely depleted within the Southeast Asian region outside of Australia. Green sawfish. This is we've heard a lot about sawfish being inshore coastal species, shallow water. There are records though of some species in deeper water, certainly off Australia. There's records of green sawfish in 70 metres, so we're not sure if that's widespread throughout the region, that it can occur in deeper water as well, but it may be a bit offshore occurring as well. Historical accounts stating various things like fairly common in India. It's difficult to put numbers or sort of too much emphasis on that because we don't really know what the basis for that fairly common was in the 1870s in India. But information is there. It's the same sort of stuff that's there, that it used to be, the species used to be common, it used to be widespread, and they're not in areas that they formerly were. And finally, the narrow sawfish, again, probably extinct in parts of its range, but again, we're dealing with high uncertainty, which is sort of what I wanted to do was to summarise the key points here about the region, Southeast Asia, Western Pacific, Eastern Indian, outside of Australia. And it's a region of intense human pressure in the coastal zone, so a lot of generally unregulated, unmanaged fisheries, coastal development, a lot of landings of everything in parts of Southeast Asia, like Indonesia. So we've got it's 8 of the top 17 shark fishing nations in the world are in this region. So in terms of sawfish, a high degree of uncertainty. We don't have the data, but we know they've disappeared from various places or declined. For example, Gulf of Thailand, good data set going back to the 60s, showing the basic disappearance of sawfish, and that's been supported with last sort of sighting in Thailand was 1983, and that's occurred through a number of countries in the region. If you look at some recent work, Will White, CSIRO and other partners did big market surveys in Indonesia, which have gone on for over 11 years now. 60,000 plus chondrichthyans have been examined, and there's 2 sawfish found. And these were believed to have come from the Arafura Sea rather than coastal areas of Indonesia, where that fishery is operating. So that's the sort of area between northern Australia and Indonesia, eastern Indonesia. And Matthew's talking about in the trade, the narrow sawfish coming from Indonesia or being marketed in Indonesia. That's certainly coming from outside the coastal areas of Indonesia. It's certainly coming from places like the Arafura or Timor Seas, or even wider again. And I think New Guinea may prove to be a regionally important area where there's still fairly pristine systems where there's populations of things like Pristis pristis. And there's a little bit more information on that species in terms of declines. We know it utilises freshwater and marine habitats. The freshwater stages mean it's a bit more susceptible to habitat loss and modification. It's been described as common in various systems in the past and may still be in places like the Fly River, but the demise or the declines have been reported widespread throughout the region, including New Guinea, Cambodian Mekong, Malaysia, and in India, previously described as abundant, and that's an area where we need to do some more work, and Vinesh has kindly given some information on the situation in India. So there certainly still occurs around there, but again, much rarer than before. So with that, I'll hand over to Colin.